Okay, we'll start with this. Interesting story happening at 122 pounds. It was announced yesterday that Sigaline Lefebvre will make her next defense, of her newly obtained WBO title, reclaimed, I should say, against the United Kingdom's own Gallagher this fall.
Late November, on the 24th.
Set to go down in Sigaline Lefebvre's neck of the woods in La France. What makes it interesting is not but 4 weeks ago, the name of Gallagher was tied to another fight with another unbeaten fighter set to go down abroad in Poland, talking about Poland's own Laura Grzyb.
This fight between them was supposed to be in defense of Laura's EBU title.
It seems that Gallagher did Laura one better, and instead of fighting for the regional EBU, she will be fighting for a full title, a world title, in her very next fight against another unbeaten fighter. Both fights are difficult fights, you understand. Hard to say that Gallagher would have secured the W in Poland, in Laura's neck of the woods, had she gone there. Hard to say she can secure the W in France.
Tyce's a good fighter, make no mistake. She's only got one loss, just one professional loss, and that is to the current reigning WBA bantamweight champion, Nina Hughes.
Over a year ago, in July of last year, she has since rebounded off that loss with 2 consecutive victories, her most recent
points decision win over amateur standout Lisa Whiteside.
So as you can imagine, young Gallagher is riding high, supremely confident, traveling abroad as the away fighter in order to challenge the champion. Being honest with you, she would have had to make it emphatic in Poland, and she still has to make it emphatic in France. You don't coast on foreign soil. And Sigaline Lefebvre,
she's not a weathered fighter, not a weathered champion. She's young, she's unbeaten, she's in her prime.
She will be defending the WBO title in her native France. Gallagher, for Tyce, it's an uphill battle, and she has her work cut out for her.
What about Laura?
If she's not going to be fighting Gallagher in defense of her EBU title, where does that leave her? And interestingly enough, a trip over to the EBU's website reveals that former WBA bantamweight champion Shannon Courtenay is ranked at number 1.
Shannon's ranked as a super bantamweight.
Shannon Courtenay was supposed to be fighting Nina Hughes for Nina Hughes' WBA title, what used to be Shannon's old title. But that fight fell through. According to Nina, it was due to Shannon not being able to make the weight, but according to Shannon, it was due to an existing injury flaring up.
Bona fide case of he said, she said.
Shannon's word against Nina's, and Nina's word against Shannon. In any event, what's interesting is that Shannon is ranked as a super bantamweight by the EBU, even though she doesn't campaign there. Is it possible that the EBU might order a fight between Laura Grzyb in defense of Laura's EBU title against Shannon? And would Shannon, if such an order comes down, would Shannon comply?
Is she interested in fighting for the EBU?
A fighter that has lost considerable momentum, fading into the background of 118 and 122 pounds. I really don't know what the future holds for Shannon Courtenay, but there are ample opportunities up there at super bantamweight if she is unable to continue to make bantamweight. Maybe she's outgrown the division. Ranked at number 2 is Maria Secchi, who Laura Grzyb already fought and Laura Grzyb already beat. Ranked at number 3 is France's own Elodie Buchlaka.
Ranked at number 3, Amy Timlin is ranked at number 4, a familiar face in young Amy Timlin.
Lisa Whiteside is ranked at number 5. Another familiar face in Spain's own Tania Alvarez at number 7. I mean, any one of these fighters
could end up fighting Laura Grzyb in defense of her EBU title. It all depends on how interested they are. The EBU title is a regional title, a European title. It's not a world title.
Ranked at number 9 is the United Kingdom's own firecracker, Stevie Levy. I feel like that is a fight that Stevie Levy might be receptive to, because unlike Shannon Courtenay, she's never been a world champion. Perhaps somebody like Shannon might not be interested in a regional belt, but Stevie Levy might be.
Slightly.
That rhymed. Now that Gallagher has essentially withdrawn from this EBU title fight, and she's going to be fighting Sigaline Lefebvre, Laura Grzyb is likely in the market for a new dance partner. That is, if she wants to keep the EBU title. If she doesn't,
she's ready to fight for some version of a full title, an interim title by way of the Major Four, the 4 sanctioning bodies. She might not be interested in any EBU order anyway.
Perhaps she's ready to fight for something bigger and something better. Laura Grzyb, the unbeaten up-and-comer from Poland.
I mean, we know what Tyce's going to be doing in the fall. What's Laura going to be doing? These questions.
Questions that need answers. We'll talk more about Sigaline Lefebvre versus Tycee Gallagher as the fight date approaches, and we'll see what happens in the career of Laura Grzyb, since she's now left without a dance partner. Men's lightweight and welterweight news. On the heels of the biggest win of his career, Terence Crawford on facing Gervonta Davis. I'd stay at 147 for him because that's a big money fight.
I know that many of Errol Spence Jr.'s supporters would immediately criticize Terence Crawford for fighting a lightweight in Gervonta Davis, but need I remind you, they withheld any criticism from Errol for fighting a lightweight Mikey Garcia.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and all the Spence fans are good for is baseless accusations and slander.
Cowards.
But alas, Terence Crawford doesn't seem at all serious about fighting Gervonta Davis because Gervonta Davis isn't serious. Crawford discussed an improbable bout versus Davis during a recent appearance on The Breakfast Club, a popular morning show program in New York's Power 105.
After Crawford's win over Errol Spence Jr., some audio from Gervonta Davis months prior to the fight.
Months prior to the Spence versus Crawford fight and its outcome, some audio of Gervonta Davis saying that he would move up in weight and fight Terence Crawford and knock him out in 6 rounds. That audio started doing the rounds. It was circulating. People were talking about it. I talked about it here on the channel and how Gervonta Davis hasn't faced the best and brightest fighters at super featherweight, at lightweight, at super lightweight. So what are the odds he's going to face the best welterweight in the world?
He's not.
He's just talking. Crawford told co-host Charlemagne the God and DJ Envy, he's got the confidence in himself that he believes that he can do that because he's been knocking all these fighters out that he's been in the ring with, So, no knock on Tank, but there's definitely levels, And if he comes up to 147 and he's thinking he's just going to knock Terence Crawford out, he's got another thing coming.
Entertaining the fight or just addressing what Gervonta Davis said. In Gervonta Davis's own words, he feels he would knock Terence Crawford out in 7 rounds. A fight between Gervonta and Terence harkens back to the fight between Mikey Garcia and Errol.
There are immediate parallels to be drawn between the both of those fights. It would feature a lightweight campaigning as a lightweight, moving up in weight.
Up 2 weight classes like Mikey did.
Mikey Garcia, who had his unification match with then unbeaten IBF champion Robert Easter, secured the W, and immediately after that, he jumped up 2 weight classes for Spence. Gervonta Davis,
he likes to run his mouth. If he likes his chances so much, put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I'll stay at 147 for him because that's a big money fight, said Crawford, who is also a former WBO lightweight champion. It's a big money fight, Yeah, but then what? Everybody's going to say he was too small. Nobody's going to give me any credit. They're going to say, oh man, you beat up a little guy that fights at 135, Tank is like 5'5", He's a little guy, Yeah, he can punch, but in his weight class. Not saying that he can't punch in any weight class because he punches.
He can punch and we can see that.
But what type of recognition am I going to get, for beating up on Tank? A lot of people don't know 137 and 147 is a big jump.
Just broaching that subject, you can see that Terence Crawford, he's not actually pursuing that fight so much as addressing what Gervonta Davis said, that he would knock him out in 6 rounds. If Gervonta Davis were actually serious about doing the fight.
He isn't. And I can hear the critics, I can hear the boo birds now criticizing Terence Crawford for a fight like that, the same boo birds and the same critics that were singing Errol Spence Jr.'s praises for doing the same thing, actually fighting a lightweight.
Terence isn't going to actually fight Gervonta Davis, but Errol Spence Jr. did actually fight Mikey Garcia.
When he did, all you could hear from Errol's supporters, his cult of followers, is how great it was that he completely dominated a lightweight, even though he failed to stop him.
Right.
That he completely outboxed the naturally smaller man, not having scored a knockout.
Or even a knockdown.
You say that, it's not the same thing because Mikey Garcia had fought at 140 pounds before, but so has Gervonta Davis. Did you forget the Mario Barrios fight?
That was at 140.
You say that it's not fair. Why should he put other fights with other welterweights on the back burner for a fight with a lightweight?
That's what Errol did.
At that time, the fight that people were asking Errol to fight in was the Crawford fight. And at that time, the fight people were asking Mikey to fight in was the Lomachenko fight. Errol put the Crawford fight on the back burner to fight a lightweight.
You already know where I'm going with this.
Jaron Ennis, a welterweight, an unbeaten up-and-comer who many of the Spence fans are now gravitating towards. he is a fighter they would like to see Terence Crawford fight. But if you were okay with Errol putting a unification match on the back burner for a cash fight with a lightweight,
then this shouldn't bother you.
because it's the same thing. It's an even bigger box office draw in Gervonta Davis than Mikey Garcia was. And you were okay with that in the name of business, so why would this bother you? Why should it?
It shouldn't.
Not if you were okay with that fight between Errol and Mikey in the name of business, putting the Crawford fight on the back burner.
That's what you guys were doing.
But alas, Gervonta Davis is all talk. He's all mouth. He has no intention of going up to welterweight to challenge Terence Crawford for the undisputed crown.
Right now, you got Floyd Mayweather saying that Naoya Inoue should move up 12 pounds, 12 or 13 pounds from super bantam up to lightweight to fight Gervonta. Why don't Gervonta move up 12 pounds to fight Terence Crawford?
Why not? What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Gonna put your money where your mouth is, or are you just a wanker?
In truth, I'm not expecting to see Gervonta Davis put his money where his mouth is. As stated, he doesn't fight the best lightweights or super lightweights in the world, so why the fuck would he fight the best welterweight in the world?
He wouldn't.
I'm just highlighting the double standards. For anyone who might criticize Terence for even broaching this subject, need I remind you, that's what your boy Errol did years ago, and you were okay with it.
Start clutching at your pearls now.
Terence Crawford, for many years now, has been the subject of unfair criticism, baseless accusations, and double standards. This would just be one more among them.
Thankfully, he's not even pursuing a fight with Gervonta Davis. His focus is moving up to 154 and cornering Jermell Charlo.
Many that are still in awe of how dominant Terence Crawford was against Errol Spence Jr. Paulie Malignaggi, former champion turned analyst, can't believe the outcome of Spence versus Crawford. It looked like they were playing two different sports.
Looked like what I told you it was going to look like. It's just that Terence got off to a faster start than I anticipated.
He dismantled him, said Malignaggi on Paulie TV. It looked like they were playing two different sports in there. At no point outside of the opening round did Spence versus Crawford resemble a clash between two fighters at the top of their game. While Crawford, of course, held up his end of the bargain, Spence could not do the same.
I said it immediately after the fight. In spite of this fight being this era's big welterweight clash, it did not have the same aesthetic as, say,
Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns or Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roberto Duran, those big welterweight contests. It did not have the same aesthetic as, say, Felix Trinidad versus Oscar De La Hoya. It was nowhere near as competitive between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., leaving many of Errol's supporters in shock and awe that he was beaten so easily, grasping at straws.
oh, he's brain damaged.
It's not what you guys were saying when he fought Danny Garcia. That's not what you guys were saying when he fought Lugas.
Oh, he was weight drained.
It's not what you guys were saying when he fought Danny Garcia. That's not what you guys were saying when he fought Lugas.
It's not.
Several days have now gone, allowing Malignaggi to sit back and closely analyze what took place. Although he's rewatched the tape and broken it down frame by frame, he's still rubbing his eyes in disbelief. I can't believe what I just watched, but I can,
Yeah.
because for 5 years, I told you that's what would happen. I told you that's how it would play out. The only difference between my prediction and what actually played out in the ring is Terence Crawford took over the fight a lot sooner than I expected him to. I expected him to take it over after 4. He took it over after 2. You've been following this channel the last couple of years. I warned that Errol Spence Jr., he better have that fight sooner than later because he's not going to be able to make welterweight forever. And if he drags this out long enough, it will work against him, not Terence. That Terence might be older by a few years, but he's not the one busting at the seams to make welterweight.
Brian Bomac McIntyre, Terrence's longtime trainer, touched on that, saying they fucked up and let Bud grow into the weight.
Make no mistake, I would have picked Terence Crawford to beat Errol Spence Jr. years ago, and I did here on the channel. The difference between then and now is I think Errol would have put up a better fight, a decent fight, a more decent fight than what we saw 2 weeks ago, but he still would have lost.
That's what I was saying 5 years ago. 5 years later, my tune didn't change.
They fucked up and let him grow into the weight, McIntyre told Fight Hype. When we dominated 140, there was nothing left to do at 140, so we had to move up to 147. We didn't have to, but we did because we wanted to challenge ourselves. So when they, the top 147 pounders, kept running and running and running and kept making excuses for themselves, you're on the other side of the street, you ain't did this, he wasn't doing nothing but growing as a man. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, Brian.
For 5 years, the PBC and the Haymanites reveled in their own mediocrity whilst running from Terence Crawford, simultaneously lambasting him for not having those fights with those fighters. Those fighters, they didn't want to fight him.
They're the ones that were running, and you're the ones that were making excuses for it.
So when the chickens finally come home to roost for Errol Spence Jr., who I've nothing against.
You want to make him out to be a victim? You want to start talking about how he's weight drained? It was his decision to drag this out. He wanted to clean up his side of the street first, remember?
So when I stop him, y'all gonna say he was too weak.
On my life.
And he stayed at 147.
You would not stop
too long.
me. You would not stop me.
Okay.
People are too predictable. Should Crawford move up to junior middleweight, McIntyre issued a warning to those contenders at 154 and perhaps a veiled one to its current undisputed champion in Jermell Charlo. So once he grew into that weight class, he could go to 154, McIntyre said. If they do the same thing at 154 and make Crawford wait, he's just going to end up doing the same fucking thing, what he did at 47. I promise you that.
And I promise you this. For any of you bleeding hearts out there, any of you fucking hypocrites now making excuses for Errol, talking about the weight.
The ones who egged him on whilst he was delaying this fight for the past 5 years, the ones who picked him to win that are now complaining about the weight, saying that he was drained. He can have a rematch with Terrence at 154, and I promise you, it won't go any different.
Scout's honor.
Because the weight at which the contest took place, Errol making weight, is but just one aspect of what you saw. Terrence being the better boxer, by and large, is another.
You say that he was coming off a year layoff in the Crawford fight, and that affected him, but he was coming off a year layoff in the Ugas fight.
And the Garcia fight. He was coming off year-long layoffs in both of those fights, and he won those fights. Why didn't he win this one?
Because Crawford is better.
You say that, well, Errol was struggling to make the weight, but Errol's been struggling to make the weight for years. He still won those fights. Why didn't he win this one?
Because Crawford is better.
It's not that the weight or the time off isn't a factor. It's that those aforementioned factors were in play in other fights where Errol won. In this fight, Errol lost. So you can't use it as an excuse.
Errol's fought under these circumstances before.
He's fought under these circumstances before, and he's won. And you picked him to win, so you least of all can point to the weight or the time off as an excuse to diminish Terrence Crawford's victory. Though if you need more convincing, Errol can activate that rematch clause at 154, which would be a better weight for him. And I promise you, it's going to go the same way.
It's not going to go any different.
So you can't equate that loss to just weight. Just the weight. That's all it was. The weight was bothering him.
Let him fight at 154, which is an easier weight for him to make, and watch how he gets beat the same or worse.
You won't have that crutch to lean on, that excuse to make anymore.
Activate the rematch clause.